When we discuss food marketing, we're not talking about advertising of food to customers. In reality, we're talking about the movement of food from the farmer to the consumer. That makes up that food marketing sector. And that food marketing sector, as we've already found out, includes the farmers and ranchers, includes the processors and manufacturers, the wholesalers and retailers. Now, we have been seeing some changes when it comes to food marketing. We've been seeing some changes in how we get food from the farmer to the consumer. And these changes can be kind of identified through the statements such as the time-starved consumer, the nutritious conscious or health-conscious consumer, or the environmentally conscious consumer. We're seeing that the consumers are now changing what they are focusing on and on what they are buying. We're also seeing some other changes. And right now, we're seeing some changes such as 80% of the U.S. food dollar in 2014 went to value-added services. Remember, the U.S. food dollar is the total amount of money that U.S. consumers are spending on food. In 2014, 80% of it went to value-added services. These value-added services are provided by the wholesaler or retailer, the processor or manufacturer, or in some other way. We're also seeing that a trend in the use of raw ingredients. At the turn of the 20th century, so right around 1900, almost all food was bought as raw ingredients. And then the people who bought them, the consumers, they prepared everything at home. Well, what are we seeing nowadays? Nowadays, we're seeing that half of the food is bought in restaurants or takeout. And then even the other half that is bought to be consumed in the home, we're seeing that an increasing number of those meals are partially or fully prepared outside of the home. So stop and think about what you might have for dinner tonight, or what you did have for dinner tonight. Was everything that you cooked with raw ingredients? Or did you buy it from some other store? Did you buy it from a fast food restaurant, ate at the house? Did you go out to eat tonight? Now, if you didn't go out to eat, then you had that food that you prepared at home. You cooked in your house. Did you use any packaged products? Or was everything 100% raw ingredients? Well, chances are, the way the trending is, that at least some of it, if you did cook at your own home tonight, was partially prepared. Or it might have even been fully prepared. And that is kind of being contributed back to this time-starved consumer. Another thing that we're seeing is that we're seeing a trend in more money is being spent on food away from home, or away from home consumption. And as we kind of go through over the past 20th century, back in the 1930s, 80% of the U.S. food dollars was spent on food to be prepared in the home. And only 20% was spent on away from home food. By the 1990s, that has changed, and 57% is now being spent on food away from home, or at home. And 47% is being spent on food away from home. So we're seeing something. We're seeing that the food spent on at-home consumption is decreasing, while the food that is spent on away from home consumption, it's actually increasing. And if we bring it to 2014, some of the latest data that we have in this book, we see that split almost evenly. That 50% of the food is spent on at-home consumption, and 50% is spent on away from home consumption. And as we just talked about over here, even of that 50%, a large portion is actually fully prepared or partially prepared outside of the home by an outside entity, a food processor. So because of all this, because of all the fact that we're spending so much away from home and so much is being fully prepared or partially prepared outside of the home, that's contributing to this 80% that is going to these value-added services. It means that consumers are spending a lot more money on these value-added services, spending a lot more money on fully or partially prepared food, and they're spending a lot more money on takeout. Another aspect is, if we look at restaurants, restaurants are receiving a larger percentage of the U.S. food dollar. Back in the 1955, 25%. Restaurants only received 25% of the total amount that was spent on the U.S. food consumption. Of this U.S. food dollar, which is the total amount spent on food here in the United States, restaurants received 25% of that in 1955. By 2014, they received 45%. So we can see that a lot more money is being spent in percentage-wise and in the nominal value for restaurants. And that's trending upwards as well. So what's causing this? What's causing the changes in this food marketing? What's causing people to be buying more partially or fully prepared food? What's causing them to eat out more? What's causing them to buy more of this away from home consumption? Well, the authors of this book have three main reasons why. Number one, dual income families. You have now families where both the mother and the father are working, they're earning more money, and then another aspect is they are time-starved consumers. If you think about it this way, and both say the mother and the father are working, but they have kids, and they still need to have food on the table at night, well, how are they going to do it? Well, they work all day. They don't have time to really prepare that food. So as a result, they go out and they get quick and easy food to prepare, something that's partially prepared or fully prepared, stuff that says ready in 10 minutes. So you really don't have to spend the time getting everything prepared. You can just throw it in a pot. 10 minutes later, everybody's sitting down to have a nice home meal. And then also a lack of culinary skills. We see that people are not as culinary savvy as they once were. So now, rather than trying to cook it themselves and possibly messing up and maybe burning the food, they rather just go out and eat. So another aspect that we're starting to see is a component of what's called Engels Law. So Engels Law states that as income rises, the proportion you spent on food falls. So the percentage of disposable income that you have falls. Back in 1929, the average U.S. American citizen spent 23.4% of their income on food. So a quarter of the money that they make essentially a quarter of every dollar went to food. 23 cents out of every dollar went to food. Well, what are we like today? Well, since the 1990 till 2014, we now spend approximately 11 to 13.3% of our income on food. We're seeing that value or that amount that we spend on food is falling, that percentage-wise. Well, why is that? Well, you can only eat so much, and as you make more money, well, you only spend so much on food. Well, simply because you can only eat so much, you only need so much food, but now you have so much extra money, you start spending it elsewhere. So you wind up spending more money. As your income rises, you spend less on necessities and spend more on stuff such as discretionary items. This is where nowadays you've got people who have now cell phones and nicer vehicles and a lot of more luxuries and things like that because they're not having to spend as much on food because their income has risen high enough. And it's actually a signal of a highly civilized or highly well-off economy whenever you start seeing the proportion of income that you spend on food falls. It's usually signaling a good economy and a good nation as far as well-off. And then we also see that this also explains why away from home consumption is not really fallen, but rather increases. Because as we spend more money on discretionary items, on luxury items, usually away from home consumption is considered a luxury item.